I think I want to start doing a segment called That You've Never Heard of, because there's all these really amazing things going around the world that people don't hear about, that aren't reported, that isn't going on. But it's just completely amazing things that say a lot about the way that people around the world are living their lives. And I think if more people had this information that we're about to talk about right now, I think people would have less of a divide across nations and thinking that people are more different than them just because they live in another part of the world. Of course, cultures are different, but we're all having a lot of the same struggles that can be tied to certain aspects of how power coalesces in our society. So, with that being said, I go to India, where, just some context for India, about 60% of India's working population is involved in the agricultural sector. 60%. India is a massive country, billions of people in there, like almost 2 billion, I believe.
It's
And
crazy.
they only represent about 15% of India's GDP. And what's been happening over the past several decades, really like originating with the English, of course, but like really taking ahead in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, was an increasing corporatization of the farming industry, away from these small farmers who are all across the continent doing these things, and more towards these sort of corporations. So it's a very standard thing, but it's really coalesced because fast forward to today, and we'll get into more context. There's a huge uprising. You had like 200 million or so people out in the streets in different parts of India, kind of uniting together, and this one big workers' protest to demand for better treatment of the farmers and a better like chance and economic stability through different measures that are put through by the government to protect farmers and make sure that they can sustain themselves and have a living while providing food for people. And of course, what happens when you have a bunch of workers getting together? The corporations do their thing in the background, and they do their best to suppress those protests by any means necessary, including working with the government to get the use of tear gas, water cannons. They were just like beating people with batons to try to quell workers in this uprising. Of course, that only made them more upset and more angry at the government, who is like messing around and creating all these new policies and taking away these protections I was talking about that make it so farmers basically have no ability to make a living. And we'll get into some of the drastic details of this, but I think it's just amazing that there's so many parallels between what's happening all the way across the world, at least for us speaking in California, and a lot of what's happening in the United States, especially as a response to COVID-19 and the way farm workers and essential workers are being treated by these large corporations in bed with the government.
So,
I think it's actually really intriguing to what's happening in India too, because it's always kind of, you want to, it's a good observation for anybody kind of watching in terms of like world politics and stuff, how countries with a billion plus manage their populations and how they manage their GDP. Obviously we know the kind of the successes of China and how they're doing. India right there next to them, kind of on a different side of that. And I think that what's what? Looking at your map, checking if that's right. Okay, I think what's interesting about India though, it's of India, out of all the countries, like especially when it comes to billion population, not a lot of them, of course, but they would really benefit a lot from the people having more, the farmers having more economic stability, getting more money. I think that if there's one type of economy that would be more successful with the people making more money, it would be a population of a billion plus. Now, of course, corporations want to leech everything they can out of so many people. Like when you have that many people, corporations are like literally like drooling and salivating at the prospect of being able to take advantage of that large population size. But it's great for them that 200 million plus hit the street and want to unionize and protest against everything that's going on, especially the farmers, because it's great because if they're able to even get a 5 to 10% increase on money back and salaries and healthcare and benefits for the people, that's going to do dramatic for just their economy in general. That's more money they're able to put back into the economy, more money they're able to put back into their own farms, upgrading technology, things like that. It's so beneficial for them. But as we know on this show, corporations are like, nah, homie, I don't care about that. I don't care if they're suffering. I don't care if how they're tilling is so old school. We want more on our end. So shout out to them for taking the approach to the people. And I would say that Americans kind of have been doing a little bit of that this year. There has been a lot of uprising. There has been a lot of unionization of the people against what they feel is improper practice by the government, improper the wages. We've seen union strikes for a long time against Walmart and people standing up, employees. So it's great to see. What the great thing I heard about the India protest is not just farmers; it's a lot of the people too, families coming out, and that's what you like to see. A lot of times we see picket lines and we just see employees, but it's great to see the communities coming together too. Community response when it comes into multiple communities, the population grows, and it's got the attention of the world. I was even reading it, and it let me down a Wikipedia loophole of reading about the history of India and what happened with England, like you brought up, and when
Crazy
when
things.
when when the colonization things are happening back then too. So pretty great.
It's 250 million people
Yes, thank you.
protested, which is ridiculous. That's so many humans said "fuck you" because they are getting
Whoa.
because they're getting screwed.
it's
They're really getting screwed by their corporations and their government.
It's the largest
the
worker
government
rights
of
movement in history, of
yeah,
people gathering on the planet. Like, just think about that for a
which
moment.
is mental. I mean, bigger than the yeah. I mean, how many uprisings has there been in human history? This is the biggest one, and by far.
Mhm.
There's been a lot of problems with the Indian government over the past couple decades. They have a lot of things with the religion stuff going on. They have their tensions with China and Kashmir land and everything else, but that's a whole different and Pakistan and too.
Yeah.
There's a whole different rabbit hole to go down under. But anyways, I know that they've been screwing their farmers for decades. One of my friends who I play hockey with, his family is Indian, so he was actually telling me about this because they moved here is because of that. When in the 90s, actually, I'm glad Dan put that in a note because I learned this from him. I learned this from Vivek, my friend. He was saying that in the 90s, when all the GMOs were starting to come out and it really screwed a lot of farmers, his family had to move because they were not getting enough money from it and stuff. And a lot of his family who were farmers, they moved to America because they just were basically almost broke and going into an obscene amount of debt because of all the GMOs and stuff that they started to put into their farms, and the corporations were starting to do factory farming, and they're like, they don't have the resources and stuff available to keep up with them, and so they had to keep raising prices. People weren't buying their stuff, and they had to go and they had to restart their lives. So it's just been, and that's been basically keeping continuing and going on and on and on. And it's crazy to see that many people rise up, and it gives me a small hope that it is possible and whatnot to still have a general strike of that regard, to still have that many people have one thing in mind to help each other out, to go around. It's not them being very selfish. It's them saying, hey, this is, as a whole, collectively, the royal we are not getting enough to survive. And if you want this country to keep being afloat, if you want yourselves to even see your profits going, you need to do us a favor and you need to change out your policies and to help us as workers in this, or else you're not going to have enough. And this whole thing too of people saying that if there aren't too many farmers, there are too many farmers in India, that's like their whole country was founded on farming. And also they literally do not have, like, a lot of these workers and a lot of these people do not have the educational systems, or they use it tends to be like the poorest, most illiterate people. They do not have the resources available for them to get out of it. So that's basically the only thing they can do is farm.
I heard that it's getting so large, it's starting to seep into just all working class people there. So I heard it's like starting to talk. One of the big discussion points is how some of these corporations, America, have industries and plants out there, and not just America, but Europe, and there's a lot of plants out there, and those workers are starting to join in too. So it's becoming a mass. It's become honestly a tornado against the other side, which is great. It's great to see these people come together for this because, and I'm kind of keeping my eye on it because I want to see how it's going to seep into some of the other East Asian countries and what's going on with there, because I know America and a lot of corporations and including Apple and stuff have stuff in China and stuff in other Asian countries in terms of like plants and industrial. So I want to see if that's gonna the tension on that side of the world is gonna seep into the other parts, because that's gonna have a massive impact. One of the reasons we're over there is just due to how cheap labor is and how we're able to exploit labor there for a mass demand of products. And I want to see how it's gonna be affected. Hypothetically, and of course, just saying if it happens, like let's say some massive wage demand happens and they increase wages and everything. Who knows? That might transition to work coming back and growing back in America, because if you're having to pay more anyways, you might as well just build more in America to have this stuff. So it's curious to see. It's curious to see who takes credit for it. I really hope that the people get what they're asking for, because that's what it's about, right? The people are making demands, and I hope they get what they want. And at least we know how powerful corporations are. I hope it's never getting, you never really get everything you want, but if you get an increase, if you get some type of change, that's a big impact, and that's what matters to me.
What I want to just highlight really fast is the economic mechanism of what is happening, because that point in the 1990s when genetically modified food started getting into the market, especially in India, what you had was these farmers who were using traditional seeds and means had to adopt these things. They had to adopt these new crops and new seeds in order to compete just on a basic level. And so they went into like all this crazy amount of debt, getting out all these loans, spending everything they had, using all the collateral they had in order to try to compete with the Monsanto UCs from these mega corporations who had all the deals with the government and had all the deals with like the global economic system that is often heralded as being something we can't touch on like a broader level, but like you can't question it on a broader level, but like we have to question what it actually does to people in these countries. And so as a result, whenever you didn't have like an unsuccessful crop and you're one of those farmers who are just taking out all these loans and you're just like in the middle of India somewhere and you're like increasingly in debt and all of your livelihood is gone, well, you had this case where the number was ridiculous. Like, since the year 2000, 300,000 farmers in India have died by suicide because this is just like all too much for them to handle. I mean, like, that is, again, not to be morbid, but also to be accurate about the number of people who have died from COVID-19. I don't know if we even care about numbers anymore, but at least like that's a factor right there.
The amount of U.S. soldiers that died in the Second World War, I mean, that's a lot of freaking humans.
Like a 9/11 every day for 10,000 days. Like that's probably wrong because I'm not that great at math, especially at those numbers.
Whoa, mathematics.
A thousand days.
There we go, 1,000. It's one of those zeros, right?
Or 100 days.
But like, there's massive damage being done to people and to communities that is kind of just being shunned away by this global multinational corporation power complex that is just push people to their limits. And so yeah, it's great that people are starting to rebel in that to some extent, at least when they see their exact material conditions being farmers. But there's always going to be that struggle of like, oh well, first they came for farmers, but I didn't react because I'm not a farmer kind of measure, where you have to kind of bring people together across class and solidarity, which if you want to talk about bringing people across class and solidarity in India, that's another cultural boundary you're going to like have to cross and go over. But like you're going to have to get these people to unite and see themselves as different, diverse parts of a common problem and a common like goal of which to solve. Bam's been uncharacteristically quiet, so I wanted to get something of what he had to say before you go, Sean.
No, like they're saying that there's been over 450 different unions and organizations that have supported this general strike in India so far. Even talking about the class solidarity, there's even doctors are going on strike.
Wow.
So it's definitely not just farmers. There's a lot of different unions that have been involved. Like basically every union that's not aligned with the government is like down for the strike or is participating.
Nice.
And yeah, it's unprecedented in a lot of ways because obviously India has over 1 billion people, but 250 million, that's like 3/4 of the United States. Like that's like an insane number. And it like maybe for us, like we're sort of metropolitan, don't really get like the power of the agricultural industry and how often farmers actually go on strike throughout the world. I remember, I want to say this was last year or the year before last, like in France, a bunch of I want to say it was tomato farmers. They were like upset at the price that they were getting given for their tomatoes. And they just like rolled up with like bulldozers full of their tomatoes and just dumped them all into the road. And I think this is in Italy. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is in Italy. Like there was a big milk, like dairy farmer protest, and they were like just dumping the milk out because of the prices they were being given for their product. Farmers like it's agriculture obviously is probably the biggest industry in the world still, and when they get together, they make big demands when they get together like that. Obviously, Monsanto is probably the most evil corporation in the world. Bayer Monsanto, whatever it is
Yes.
now. But yeah, I mean, when I was reading about it, it kind of reminded me also because we also mentioned how the strikes in India didn't really get too much coverage. I remember the teacher strikes that were happening here last year and in 2018. They
Mhm.
were huge. And I mean, not to say they didn't get coverage, because obviously I was reading about it and they did get coverage, but it's like,
Not the proportional
you know,
coverage that you would have suspected a monumental moment like that, amount of like solidarity and unison around a political issue compared to whatever like fake foreign policy like drama that um, Trump was getting himself into at that particular time. Like there's about
yeah,
disproportionate media coverage.
yeah, for sure. Like, and obviously, like people who know about American history, like domestically, like there's been massacres in regards to strikes and like
Oh
labor
yeah.
activity. Like it's probably, if you read about like labor in this country, like you'll hate America. Like there've been like massacres against striking people in this country, and it's probably the biggest fight that there's been from jump is like the fight of the elite class against labor, and do everything to divide people along those lines, to make sure there's like zero class solidarity and just keep people divided so they don't end up doing these labor actions. So it's really great to see that going on in India. It was so many people. Obviously, they couldn't come out, and yeah, I do think there was some violence, but it was like so many people that they couldn't just go out and start shooting everybody, which I'm sure that Modi
They
would
wanted
not
to.
be opposed
Modi would
to
very much not be
necessarily.
opposed to.
Yeah, and I want to say there was some violence in the beginning, but it got so big that there couldn't be any kind of like massive violent response. So yeah, like Caesar was saying, hopefully we can see these actions seeping into other countries, maybe Vietnam,
Mhm.
Thailand, Malaysia, where they have a lot of these like sweatshop ass factories. Um, you know, labor around the world can stand up, or whatever other communist tagline I can think of.
The humble proletarian almost nothing but his chains. Um,
Ooh,
the other thing is that the media does not want to cover this as much as they can because it'll give hope into the workers. And the last thing that
God forbid.
the upper class wants is a worker uprising, because that's how you get rid of them.
Yes.
And they don't want that because they want their money. Also, I swear to God, when Bayer bought out Monsanto, they did it so that way they could sell you a pill after they poison you with all the GMOs that are in their foods.
At,
thanks,
at, at,
thanks
at Bill
Germany.
Gates and all this. At Bill Gates and all this. A big investor in
Thanks,
Montana.
We
thanks
call that
Germany.
vertical
Yeah,
integration. That's
yeah.
vertical integration, folks. That's a business tactic, and it's a hell of a job. Um, no, that pretty much does it. Like we have so much more that unites us than divides us, especially when it comes to the material struggles that we face every single day, whether it is in India, in the United States, in whatever space shuttle like SpaceX test rocket for Mars that Caesar happens to be in.
Oh,
I'm at an official military facility right now. We're
so
building
let's,
robots, so just please watch your mouth because we
man,
will
let's
find you.
SN9 or what?
Can I can I say something else about India too? Like probably people sitting in the United States wouldn't understand how diverse India
Oh
is,
yeah,
Oh
um,
yeah.
ethnically, religiously, and the rich history of some place like India. Like those things are generally impediments to massive like political or labor action, but it's definitely like something to be celebrated that a lot of people were able to put those differences aside and come out for like labor rights.
there's a lot of differences between Indians too. Like there's a lot of racism between classes and stuff in India as well.
Wow, you
There's
got
a
to
lot
bring
of
up the bad
stuff.
part. Wow, wow.
But no, I'm saying that there's a lot of stuff that people don't talk about within it, but it's really cool to see a lot of people standing together, and despite all of that, to go into one
But like
common
to
goal.
that point, I'll just say that like it's the same things that, because at least I'll speak from being in a lot of different cultures personally, that like every culture has like within their own culture different like sort of classes they have that are implicit or explicit based on how
No,
they
yeah,
view
naturally.
other people within that class. Of course, it just always gets to a new level once you have 2 billion people on earth, or 2 billion people like in your country. Like it's always going to hit this new sort of maximum point, if you will, because there's just more people kind of that you're working with. And so yeah, people just do not sleep on India.
Yeah, and I'll make a quick point. I know it's okay to go off topic real quick. I know there's a flat.
I mean,
flat
we're,
feed.
we're
No?
near the end.
Okay.
I mean, if you want to continue changing Zoom backgrounds,
Yeah. It's real quick. I was seeing some articles and stuff this week. They were talking about how, like the counterpoint to the COVID stuff we talked earlier about relief is like, well, some countries were just providing relief, and look what happened to their debt. An example was used in Brazil. Me and Bam come in live from the same place. He's on the other side of the department. It's funny that their counterpoint is like, well, look, Brazil did a economic stimulus plan in September, monthly for $55 American dollars a month, 300 reals, and look at the turnout. I think that's one of the stupidest points I ever heard in my entire life. When the country, literally during this pandemic, we have unemployment here, right? There's unemployment in America that's supreme levels, like it's ridiculous. But we don't have an 80% extreme poverty population. So when you have an 80% extreme poverty population and you're giving them 300 reals a month, how do you expect a massive growth in economic? People are just trying to use that money to just survive another month. So I think it's really corny when they're using, for example, we talked about Sweden as an example, whatever, when they're using these other small European countries as a positive point for them on why they can't use. Hey, you hear me over here? I'm talking to you across the way. I think it's really whack when they're doing that. When the attention needs to be getting relief aid to the people now, especially before the end of the year. It's sad that a lot of people value how important holidays are here, but a lot of people don't have money to spend the holidays for their families, especially whether you're celebrating Hanukkah, whether you're celebrating Christmas or whatever, or the Kwanzaa, you're doing your thing. It's sad that we're going to probably not have an answer by Christmas. They might extend it to then because senators want to take weeks off from doing work, and I hope that some change comes soon because people reserve the relief aid before the end of the year, and that's what they voted for, and I hope they get that soon.
What the hell is this dude going backwards on the episode for? Dan, are you gonna clip that and put it back when we were talking about that?
I love how Bam just loves to like live edit during the show and like react quickly to whatever's going on the screen. Also,
Yeah, but he won't live edit his own face onto the screen. He still has his mouth off screen, but go ahead though, go off. We still get forehead cam all day of Bam.
Pause. But
I'm gonna come over there and fix his camera. He's right there. Hold on.